you are the founder and principal scientist of KRIS, the Knowledge for Regeneration and Innovation in Soil Systems Education and Consultation. So what is KRIS, and just talk about yourself for a bit.
KRIS is basically an education and consultation firm where we're looking at activities and principles that farmers can put into place to work with the soil foundation to help to regenerate soil, and how that's going to impact regenerating communities, as well as helping to link soil health and human health so that we can be able to produce higher quality food on our soils and improve the health of our soils.
So how did you get into this sector?
Well, I have degrees in environmental microbiology and in soil science, and I worked for the United States Department of Agriculture for a number of years in North Dakota, and was able to work with a number of farmers who were working in putting in place some very innovative practices. And so what I'm looking at is really capitalizing on the knowledge that farmers have been putting into place to create these very innovative and integrated and dynamic systems where they're going to be utilizing, again, the soil foundation, where you're looking at the biology in the soil as a mechanism to essentially be able to produce higher quality food by reducing some of the inputs that you're putting into the soil, some of the synthetic inputs, but actually then maximizing the resources that you have in the soil, the biological inputs that have been in there, working with the plants and working with the systems that have been designed for millions of years.
All right, and you're going to be talking at the MFGA's Regenerative Agriculture Conference, Adapting to Today's Food and Farming World. So what sort of stuff are you going to be discussing during your time there?
Well, I'm going to be talking about the principles that producers can utilize in order to be able to maximize the soil processes, and how that's going to be able to build up resilience in the system. This is really, again, a systems approach where you're trying to utilize these multitude of processes where we can work with building resilience against climatic uncertainty. We've seen a number of challenges over the last several years with precipitation events. It's always a challenge in agriculture because we never get weather events at the right time. And so how are we going to be able to create more resilience against some of those different changing patterns that we're starting to see? And then, at the same time, looking at ways in which we can better manage new pests and diseases that we're starting to see because of some of the changes that we're starting to see with climate. So, we're getting some new weed issues. We're also getting some new insect pest issues, and how we're going to be able to build up some of the resilience in our systems to be able to combat those issues. And when you look at a soil-based approach and you're working with the great diversity of organisms that you can have in the soil, it's using multitude of pathways in order to combat a number of these issues instead of some of the single approaches that come from a lot of the chemical-based approaches. So when you're utilizing basically a biogeochemical approach that is centered in the soil, that's going to be able to provide you with a lot of different pathways to be able to manage the system as a whole. And that's going to provide for a greater level of success.
Why do you think producers should be coming out to hear you speak and come out to hear what everyone has to talk about this issue?
Well, I think it's important for producers to come out to the conference because I think that they're going to learn a number of different things from myself as well as the other speakers at the conference. They've got a very good lineup of speakers. And what's really important for farmers as well as consumers is being able to figure out ways in which for farmers they are going to be able to grow their crops and enhance their bottom line. Again, being able to build the resilience so that you're not having to have years that are going to have, you can have some really good years and some really bad years, but it's hard to be able to have a good economic bottom line when you're dependent upon a production system in which you're very much dependent upon climatic issues or other types of issues, and you don't have a lot of resilience in there to be able to thrive under a number of different conditions. And so when there's a lot of challenges facing you, it can be very difficult to be able to withstand that from an economic standpoint. And if you can find different ways to be able to manage pest and disease issues as well as to manage fertility without having to add a lot of cost to your production system, that's going to help to enhance your economic bottom line. And it also, looking at these systems that many of the speakers are going to be talking about within regenerative agriculture, it's looking at systems that are going to be creating systems that are very diverse in the different types of crops that you may be growing. It's looking not at growing less, but actually looking at intensifying your systems so that you are able to have a number of different products that you might be able to market. And that's going to also help with your economic bottom line because you have different market streams you may be able to access. So there's a lot of different ways in which, from an economic standpoint, an individual producer will benefit. But when you're talking about producers and consumers, there's also a lot of knowledge that's going to come out in being able to discuss the way that consumers can benefit from a greater understanding of how we're going to be able to get more nutritive-dense food and how that's going to be able to provide products where we're not going to be looking at consumers having to eat more and have less quality in their food and how that's negatively impacting our overall health as a society, but how we're actually going to be able to produce food that's going to be more beneficial to us. And it's not going to require us to, basically our brains are telling us to eat more because we're not getting the nutrients from our food. So our bodies are demanding more nutrition and it's demanding us to eat more. But what we really need is to have more nutrient-dense food. So if we can get a higher level of nutrient density out of our food, we're going to be consuming less, and that's going to overall be beneficial to us from a health standpoint as consumers. So there's going to be a lot of really good information, I think, not just from myself, but from all of the speakers. And I would encourage people from across the Canadian provinces and across the northern United States to come and attend the conference in Manitoba.